Hey guys, this is Katie Dozier and Colin Moshman for CardsChat.com, and welcome to the final day of our course, Become a Winning Poker Player in 30 Days.
Yes, and the topic of day 30 is the final exam. We're going to see exactly what we've learned together over the past 30 days. So let's get right into how this is going to work.
Alright, so what we're going to be doing for this final is testing your knowledge over 15 different hands. We're going to do that in two different parts, and we'll talk about what those two different situations are when we reach them.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk now about scoring. So keep score very carefully. Some of the hands are going to have multiple small questions, and when that happens, you only get the point if you get all questions correct for that hand. So we'll get to that. And this is an unlimited time open book test. You can use the videos. The only thing is that you have to complete it by yourself. So with that said, what is part one, Katie?
Part one, we're going to be stepping into the shoes, high-heeled or sneakers, you take your pick, of the low-stakes professional poker player. And we're going to be checking out 9 key hands from a session that we think really embody the tools that we've most talked about and are the most crucial for winning in poker. And this is going to be hands that come from a wide mix of different formats, such as 6-max, 18-man, 9-man SNGs, as well as MTTs.
All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to begin with one warm-up hand, which is going to be the first hand of a 6-max sit and go. So this one is going to consist of 2 mini questions. Again, you need to get both of those questions correct to score the point. If you miss one or both of them, then no points.
See,
so
Colin
be careful.
went to a good school where they don't give partial credit. We grew up with partial credit, but no partial credit in this final exam.
Yes. The good news, though, is that this is kind of a warm question. This is a bit of an easier one. So I think all of you guys are going to do very well at it. And the first mini question is simply, what is your action here? Is it going to be to fold, call, or raise? And the correct answer here is to raise. So there is an ante. This hand is going to play very well with deep stacks. For more on this, check out our guide to pre-flop play, where this is definitely part of our opening range from the cutoff with an ante. So hero makes it 60. And Katie, what do we have now in question number 2?
All right. The question now for the second part of our mini quiz questions is going to be, what should we do on this flop at this point?
Okay. And what is the answer?
The answer is going to be that we should c-bet, definitely here. So there's almost every single reason you could imagine to c-bet on this flop. So it's a dry flop. We do not have showdown value, most likely, with our 9 high, so that's another big reason that we want to go ahead and c-bet. We do have some potentially good backdoor draws that could come into play, so a reason that we'd be happier for the pot to increase the size. And so everything points to c-bet, which is the correct answer.
Absolutely. So we're going to raise pre-flop here, c-bet this tri-flop. That's what hero does. Maybe slightly large sizing, but a correct line. And now let's move on to question number 2.
So this hand comes from one of my favorite formats, 45-man SNGs. Played a few in my day.
And you appear to be the heroine in this hand, Katie, so hope you do yourself proud.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and open here. I assumed a 125. And we get called by both blinds. Checks to us, and we're going to go ahead and fire a c-bet. And we get called just by the big blind. So the turn, we hit our straight.
Absolutely, yes.
And we're going to go ahead and bet again. And Swallow that decides to check call another straight here. But we haven't reached the quiz question until right now. So Colin, my question for you is, what should we go ahead and take as our action here?
Yes, so this is going to be the full question for hand number 2. So pause the video, decide on your answer. And the correct answer with this one is you should go ahead and shove. It doesn't matter that there's a higher possible straight. It doesn't matter that the backdoor flush came in. You most likely have the best hand, or at least a chop, and you should go ahead and shove. There's a great risk-reward ratio. You'd be betting under half the pot. And this is how you win at poker. You win at poker by making the best hand and value betting. So it's absolutely vital you come in here with the value shove. And what are you targeting? Well, you can target 2-pair hands like Jack 8, 7 X hands, which are the worst straight. Maybe this guy is going to really overplay Jack, so a hand like King Jack. But shoving is the correct play. And let's see if Katie does that. I'm kind of hoping no, I'm not going to say it.
I would be really mad at myself if I didn't shove. What was I doing on the turn if I didn't want to play for stacks would be my question. So.
And you do go ahead and shove. It's a chop. So well-played hand.
Boo on the chop.
Yes, but a well-played hand. Moving us to the third one. We are now on the bubble of a 6-max sit and go. 3 people left, 2 paid with the normal 6-max 65-35 payout structure. And the question here is, what is our action pre-flop? Should we fold, call, or raise? There are going to be 2 mini questions to this hand. This is the first one. So pause the video, decide on that. And Katie will be giving her answer.
All right. So here, there's one answer you can give that is 0 credit. You have failed this question of the test, and that is if you think we should fold. So we will accept call, but we vastly prefer raising in this particular spot. And the reason that we prefer that is because we are on the bubble. This is a 6-max S&G, and if you check out button stack, it's so dramatically small compared to the big blind, so we can apply so much pressure in spots like this. And so we're going to be looking to do that more so by raising than by calling. But you apply no pressure when you fold, so that's the wrong answer.
Absolutely. But to clarify, we will indeed give you credit here for limping, even though we stylistically prefer raising. Fewer raises, sizing-wise, from the small blind, like we talk about in that section, we prefer more than the min raise. So this sizing is slightly too small. But either way, it's a raise. That's something. We'll take what we can get.
We can't be totally strict in this exam if we want students in the future.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. So our question here is, what is our flop action? This is going to be the second mini question. Do we check or bet? So pause the video and come up with your answer. Katie, take it away.
All right, here is another spot we should definitely go ahead and c-bet. Mostly for the reasons that we already brought up, that we should be raising pre-flop. We want to go ahead and apply maximum pressure to this mid-stack on the bubble. And we also do not have much showdown value probably with 7 high.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, another aspect of it, which you certainly didn't have to include as part of your answer. So to clarify, the correct answer is just bet. But we're going to triple barrel a lot here because we want to apply maximum pressure to the big blind. On a lot of runouts, we're going to go bet, bet, bet. So that is an important thing to keep in mind with tournament pressure. In game, Hero puts out a nice sized half pot c-bet and takes the pot down.
All right, so for our next final exam question, we're going to be checking out this hand from an 18-man S&G, where I assume we're going to open. And we do. And we get called by the big blind here. And then the big blind checks to us. And now we reach our question, which is, what is our full post-flop plan going to be using the language that we talked about in day 16 of hand planning? Colin, that's a long question. Do you feel up for answering it?
Yes, I do. So hopefully you guys have paused the video, you've come up with your answer. And to answer this one, we're going to take a look at a slide that details what constitutes a correct and incorrect answer. So first, just to clarify, you do not get a point for this one if, number one, most importantly, you say to bet all 3 streets. The problem is that worse hands are not going to call 3 bets because we have second pair here. So that's not going to work if you want to also raise any street. And then on the flip side, if you say no post-flop bets, that's not going after enough value. So those are all going to be unacceptable answers. You might say, well, what is a correct answer? That would be fair. So let's go on to that. So correct answer guide. You must have said in your answer to check back either the flop or the turn for pot control. That is the single most important aspect of a correct answer. Pot control is going to be vital in a spot like this second pair. And you must also value bet at least one street. We prefer two. The ideal answer here is going to be to check back the flop, considering that it's a dry flop, and then one bet goes in each on turn and river. So we call those bets if our opponent bets, and otherwise we bet ourselves looking to get value.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those spots where it's just super important to get some value, but not to go overboard. And it's really easy to sort of talk yourself into playing too tight or too loose in these spots. So you've got to make sure you're walking that line reasonably.
Absolutely. And you know what? You could have changed my entire answer to just pot control. That probably wouldn't be complete, but that is the most important concept here.
Definitely.
And for the sake of completeness, let's just go ahead and finish the hand, even though that was the only exam question applying to this hand. Here does check back the flop, which is great. We're expecting one bet to go in at the turn, which is exactly what happens. And we river to pair. And spots like this actually, I think, are somewhat opponent dependent. So here, a lot of the time, you should just value raise. But against a tighter opponent, they're not really going to be betting and calling with a lot of worse hands. So again, it depends a little bit, but this is normally going to be a pretty solid raise and a nice attempt to get value.
Yeah, versus a reg or someone that I have a read on as being more solid, I would probably tend to just call here on the river. But against a looser opponent, I like raising in general.
Yes, I do like this raise. I agree with what you're saying. And you know what? This spells bad news. It's actually a little bit unusual that here a raise is small instead of shoving. Shoving would be sort of a more normal raise sizing. And once you do this, you're committed, but you're also beat. So
you're annoyed but committed. You know, like a lot of Norman Chad's marriages.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, that didn't look good for Hero at a certain point in that hand.
No. All right, so let's move on to the next hand.
All right, so for our next final exam question, we're going to be looking at this 9-man S&G. We are already in the money, so good news.
Katie, pardon me. Who is this handsome player in the big blind?
Oh, my. It's my very own husband. Why? I didn't realize that. Hopefully you played this hand perfectly, because otherwise I might not have noticed it was you, and you could have squeaked by.
Believe me. No chance of a mistake here.
All right, so here we have the action being that the button has min raised. And what should we do here, Colin, as our first part of this final question, which is going to be one more question after this for this question?
Yes, aka this hand has two mini questions, and this is the first of those mini questions. Do we fold, call, or raise? So, come up with your answer. Correct play here is going to be to call. Now, we also accept to 3-bet. The important thing is that you don't fold. This will be a profitable hand to defend in the big blind. Because it plays well, I would normally call here, but we can also pressure the mid-stacked opponent on the button by 3-betting. So both of those are going to be completely legit answers.
And as part of not one of the questions, but just out of interest, what sizing would you most prefer?
If you were to 3-bet?
If you were to 3-bet, because some of us like to play a bit more aggressively than others and would tend to be 3-betting as opposed to just calling.
Out of position a little bit over a 3x 3-bet, so 3x here would be 720, and that would be going something like 780.
Yeah, and I think that's good. So I brought this up just because, to me, wanted to point out that this is a bit deep to just shove. Even
Absolutely.
by my standards.
Absolutely, yes. So anything over 25 blinds effective, it's going to be pretty rare that we would consider shoving. So, the second quiz question for this hand is, what is our flop plan? So, for example, you can say bet out, check fold, check raise, check call. What are we going to do at this flop? So again, this is the second of two mini questions for the fifth hand. Think about that. And the correct answer here is that we should go after a check raise. And the reason for this, because all the factors are great for check raising. We have a very strong draw on a coordinated flop. So we've got 8 straight outs plus equity from pair partial outs and backdoor flush draw. are only going to be a slight underdog to a very strong hand like ace-7 suited. We expect our opponent to bet since she does have the pre-flop betting lead. We want to apply pressure, so check raise is going to be the way to go here.
It's hard to argue, with me against a check raise.
So this is going to be a KD-approved check raise. Hopefully that is in fact what I do. And we're all the more inclined to do it when he min-bets, which looks pretty weak. So that is going to be the end of that. But let's go ahead and see how this hand plays out. Now, you know what? Sometimes weird things happen in poker, and this appears to be one of those times. So let's...
Weird things like your opponent telling you they have you beat?
So what my interpretation of this re-raise here is that this guy, I don't believe it. He initially just min-bet at the flop. So I think I have a good amount of fold equity on a 4-bet shove.
Oh, no.
When I get called, you know what? I do have a good draw.
All right.
So this is going to be a jam.
Before you play this hand out, I want to go on record as saying that this looks very strong to me. This player looks like they're like, oh, maybe if I raised it this amount, then they'll shove over me. That's like a crying for you to please shove, Moshman. Please shove.
Okay, so like I said, he folds. he folds. Either that or I get a massive suck out against pocket aces.
Right.
But fortunately, you know what? Whether or not you should 4-bet the flop was not part of this quiz. The check raise is, I think, one aspect we can both agree on.
To be fair, I would not have included aces in his range with that c-bet sizing, to be fair. But I did include hands that had you beat, which were a lot of them.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Katie, you appear to be back in the hot seat. Take hand number 6 away.
All right, so this is a rebuy MTT, a fun format that I enjoy playing where UTG has open 3x and then the hijack calls and we get to go on ahead with our 9-8 suited, see a flop, which is always a fun time for me personally, especially in late position.
So you go ahead and call here with your flush draw. Looks pretty good to me. And now we're going to get to the first of 3 mini quiz questions. You guys heard that right. 3 of them.
Guess I play the hand really well and excitingly if we have 3 questions for this hand.
Absolutely, yes. All right. So, first mini question is going to be, how many outs do we have? And the correct answer here is going to be 12 outs. You have 9 outs to a flush and 3 outs to a gut shot straight. So that's going to be the 3 non-heart 7s. So again, 12 outs.
What if I said the number of outs that I have is I have too many to actually end up hitting? Would you give a point to that?
No, you need at least like 25 or 30 outs.
Then you're
for that
guaranteed
to be the
to
case.
miss.
Yes. Now, the second mini quiz question is, what is your equity as a percentage of the pot? So I'll pause the video, come up with that. And the correct answer here is going to be 25%, or close to it is fine as well. We talked about the rule of 2 and 4, so here with a 12-out draw, if you said 24%, we definitely accept that as well. Anything that's 25% or right around there is going to work. And one way that you can see that as well is the awesome Cards Chat odds chart, which you're welcome to have up as you play. Let's go ahead and look at that in the context of this answer. So here on this row, we have inside straight and flush draw. It says that we have a 12-out draw, and actually says 26%. So kind of embarrassing that I seem to have given the wrong answer. But I think that it's fair because I said around 25%.
We accept 24, 25, and 26. And also, for the 26, you get a little bit of a well-intended extra credit for being right when we were wrong.
Yes. It's not actually an extra credit point, but it's extra credit.
I'm trying to help you guys out. I'm trying to give out extra credit. I wanted to bring snacks. He said
from
no.
our hearts. And the final mini quiz question is, what should you do here facing a half pot bet? So the correct answer there is you should call. When your opponent bets half pot, that means you're going to be getting 3-1. And you have a 12-out draw, which means you're getting about 3-to-1 odds. So you need 3-to-1 odds in order to call. So again, look at that chart. The chart that we just showed gives that information. And so even without factoring in implied odds, because future betting works in our favor with a strong draw like this, we have the immediate odds to call and continue facing a half pot bet. And one thing that we're not going to quiz you guys on, but is important, is if this player were to check, our best action here is to bet, because this is a strong draw, but we don't have showdown value with 9 high.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So let's see how this hand plays out. Those were the 3 quiz questions. But you go ahead and call here, which is 100% correct given the implied odds.
Oh, bam! How do you like that heart?
It's decent. And look at this. Look at this. This is a spicy all-in. You could call it by a worse hand. Way to go, Hatch any 314.
Well, something I'd like to point out quickly to here, too, is that obviously with that being a very large shove on the river, in my experience in rebuy MTTs in particular, you're a lot more likely to get action with spots like that. So I tend to make larger shoves in those than I normally would during the rebuy period, because people are there to gamble and I'm there to take their chips.
Wow, I like that. I like that. So yeah, an excellent adjustment there to that format. And let's move on now to hand number 7.
All right, so for our next final exam question, which is going to have 3 parts and seems to feature Colin again in the big blind.
It does.
The Mosh Man, the preferred screen name, I think.
Yes.
And so we're going to be looking at this action on the bubble with Colin as the chip leader. You're always the chip leader on the bubble of an S&G.
I have never made it to the bubble of a sit and go without the chip lead. Fun fact about the Moshman.
All right, so our first question here is going to be, what should you do facing this min raise from the small blind?
Okay. So think about that one. And the correct answer here is we're going to again accept 2 possible answers, which are call or 3-bet. We definitely do not want to fold for a couple of reasons here. One of them is, like we talked about in the day on big blind play, you can defend very wide facing min raises when you're the big blind and it's the small blind who's raised. And the other reason why it's very important is because this is the second chip leader. We've got position against him, and we want to apply a lot of pressure. So again, both calling and 3-betting are perfectly acceptable answers. I go ahead and call. I believe my colleague would have 3-bet, but what do I know?
Your colleague indeed would have 3-bet, but calling is totally reasonable. I just would have freaked out if you folded.
Okay. Well, that would have made it for an interesting moment in the video.
At least it would have been a bit unexpected, I think.
Yes. And now we have our second part of this hand, the second question, which is facing this flop bet. What is your play? And the correct answer here, yet again, 2 acceptable answers, which are call or raise. So like we talked about in the day on floating, there are a couple of nice things going for us here in this spot. One of them is the fact that we only face a half pot bet, so we get 3-to-1 pot odds to continue on here. We also have backdoor straight and flush draws. Possibly most important, again, is the fact that we want to pressure this opponent by being very stubborn. So for that reason, I like floating here and calling on this fairly dry flop. But raising also works. The important thing is you do not want to fold and make life easy for this player.
Yeah, this is a spot where I actually prefer floating as opposed to raising too.
Yes, great spot to float here. Which is what the Moshman does.
Oh gosh,
no
the
surprise there.
Speaking in third person now.
Yes, that's just how the Moshman rolls.
No, don't talk like that, please, please.
And now we have one last decision, playing the hand where at the turn our opponent checks. So the third and final question is check or bet. And the correct answer here, full credit, is for betting. And the reason for that is because we don't have a lot of showdown value with the weak 10 high. So we want to go ahead and bet our float. That's normally going to be our plan when floating. This would also be a semi-bluff with an 8-out open-ended straight draw. So go ahead and bet here to apply pressure and semi-bluff our draw.
It's really important to not mistake floating for playing hit-to-win poker on the next street, too. So generally, if you're floating, it needs to be with the plan of firing later in the hand without hitting.
Absolutely. And if he did call here, I would be betting most rivers as well.
But you would be annoyed.
Yes.
You'd be annoyed.
But fortunately, he folds.
And the float works out in the maximum cool way.
Yes.
Well played, Moshman.
Thank you.
All right, so you find yourself as hero, heads up in this S&G with Queen 7 on the button. And we are going to go ahead and min-raise. We get called by the big blind, the only other player. So if we got called by somebody else, that would be a bit surprising.
Yes, the big blind is our most likely candidate for calling this raise. So we c-bet here. Our opponent calls. And the question that we have for you guys, there's only going to be a single question associated with this hand, and it's a pretty straightforward one. Is this, in our estimation, a good spot to double barrel, to fire this turn? So you could say, yes, this is a good spot to double barrel. No, it is not. Either way. So pause the video, come up with your answer. And the correct answer here is no. This is not a good spot to double barrel for a few reasons. Number one, this card does not change the board texture much. If he liked his hand at the flop, he probably likes it at the turn. We also have too much showdown value with the queen high. So if he has a better hand, it's unlikely he's going to fold that hand. If he has a worse hand, it's pretty unlikely that he calls. And one thing you might think about in a spot like this is, what is our opponent's range? And here he's got plenty of 2x hands like Jack Deuce suited. He's got some queen high and king high hands, some flush draws, some random diamond hands like 10-8 with the 8 of diamonds. And on balance, we have reasonable showdown value there. So don't double barrel here.
You definitely don't. This is a pretty clear one, I think. Some of our hands are a bit closer than this one, but this is really important to identify as the perfect spot to never double barrel, I would say.
Yes. And here, let's take a look at the showdown here. We check this down. We are again looking to showdown queen high. And he had a gut shot and diamond, so a little bit loosey-goosey on his part, perhaps.
Yeah, loosey-goosey, eh? We don't allow that kind here.
But it does show the point that he's probably not going to fold this hand. He's got too much showdown value. So against this hand, this would not be a good one to double barrel.
All right, so for this next final exam question, of which there are going to be 2 parts to this, we're going to be looking at one of my favorite formats, which is a 3R 180 man. And I played quite a few of these in my day, too. You go ahead and open up in the hijack with the ace-jack offsuit, small blind flats. And we head to the flop in position 1 opponent. And going to go ahead and c-bet here on the larger side. We get called. Not the best turn in the world.
Nice check back here for pot control, Katie. I like this. Well done.
Well, thank you. Yes, pot control, definitely going to go ahead and pretty much always be checking back that turn. And now we reach the river with a bet out of full pot. Somewhat unexpectedly.
Perhaps, yes. For those unprepared for the full spectrum of opponent actions, I would have already known he was going to bet exactly this amount.
Right, just like you knew on that previous hand when you got it in terribly.
Yes, just like that, in fact.
All right, so the first question we're going to be looking at here is, should we value raise this river?
All right, so think about that. And the correct answer here is yes. This is not at all close. We've rivered the full house. Plenty of worse hands can call. Yes, you must value raise this river. Now, the second question is going to be, what is the higher EV decision? A min raise or shoving all in? Is there any other way to shove?
Shoving partially? I don't know. That's something bit inappropriate, I think.
Minor redundancy there. So 600 or jam, what is the higher EV play? So think about that. And the correct answer here is to shove. So for that, look back on our section on expected value. When we min raise, the EV of a min raise is going to be capped at 300. That's the most we can win, and we won't even win that much on average because occasionally he's going to fold. So we should go after max value. There are a lot of worse hands that can call, and go ahead and shove here.
Another reason, too, I like shoving here is because it's the same thing I was talking about earlier with being the rebuy and people being more willing to stick it in when it's, even a huge shove. So I would be even more inclined in a rebuy to go ahead and do this versus a different tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, well, Katie, I like your shove the best here. I would point out that it wouldn't be crazy to make another larger raise that's less than all in, but a min raise is certainly not going to be our highest EV option.
Yes, and also sometimes when you make a huge shove, you get credit for your hand being weaker than if you raise smaller. So that's why I tend to like to do that too. And also I have sort of a crazy image sometimes in MTT S&Gs that I like to take advantage of when I actually have it too.
Yes. Now, Katie, ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
Okay, we've got an extra credit question. This is a surprise extra credit question. There's only going to be one of these, guaranteed. So, check it out. The question here is, assuming that our opponent is a somewhat reasonable player, what is his value range in the spot? Okay, so we've seen here, when I say in the spot, just to clarify, up until the point where he is bet 300 at the river, what is his value range? And to get the point here, you need to give all hands in his range, specifying if they're suited, and also giving that suit if it matters. So think about that, write it down, and the moment we're going to pull up a slide that identifies what constitutes a correct answer. All right, so the way we've done this is what the range you gave must contain, what it can contain. It might not be in ours, but it's okay if it's in yours, and what it cannot have. So the key thing is that the biggest part of his range is going to be the suited Broadway hands. So ace-10 suited and the suited Broadways are all reasonable for him to call with pre-flop. Those hands would then call the flop with a pair plus gut shot or two pair, looking to play perhaps a medium-sized pot. Queen-10 suited would be a slow play. And then at the river, these hands are all value betting. Since they're straights, they're worse full houses, 2Rs. So those are going to be the most consistent hands. Note, by the way, we beat all of those hands besides the one specific combo of King-10 of hearts, which is the elusive royal flush.
Yeah, and it's never so bad to lose to the royal flush. I mean, in terms
of... It's
an
honor.
Yeah, it's an honor. You tip your hat and you go on your merry way when you lose to that royal flush.
Absolutely. Now, you can put in his range ace-10 off, king-9 of hearts, 10-9 of hearts. Those are less likely because like ace-10 of offsuit isn't a great hand to call with pre-flop. 10-9 of hearts isn't a great one to call the flop with. So those are a little more marginal, but we will accept those. And your range cannot contain anything else. So, for example, queens plus, we assume that the high pocket pairs, if he's playing reasonably, he's going to 3-bet pre-flop. Ace-queen is not going to value bet here. So pulling this back up. So if you have ace-queen here, the flush has come in. There are 4 to a straight. Trips is possible. 4 houses are possible. Very unlikely that somebody is going to bet full pot here with a hand like ace-queen. So that is our bonus question for you guys.
Yeah, I think one more thing that's important to keep in mind, too, is that Villain is going to very rarely be bluffing here when he bets big on the river and there are no busted draws. This is one of those scenarios where all the draws got there, and so it's a very unlikely scenario that he's bluffing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a great point. And another reason why betting big or even jamming here are such great options, because his line looks very strong. And you know what, Katie? We should actually look at the result of this. You jam, you do get called, and this is the kind of hand. Suited Broadway works out great.
I'm glad it wasn't of hearts.
Yes.
I prefer that he had it of diamonds, though I do stand by what I said, and I would have tipped my hat that I'm not wearing to him had he shown down the royal flush.
Awesome. All right, so now that we've looked at this bonus one, big news, Katie. It is time for part number 2. Dos. Duh. And here we're going to be deep in a turbo MTT. Now, in the midterm, we looked at a Turbo MTT, the earlier part. We're going to go back to that same game and look at 6 total hands in order from the late game of this Turbo MTT. And we're going to look at both final exam questions and a few other interesting spots as well to set the stage that we'll talk about but will not be part of the test. So the emphasis here is going to be on shorter stack situations, beating turbos, and strong pre-flop play, including knowing your ranges very well. So Katie, what do you say? Are you ready?
I'd say I'm ready and I'm excited because to me this is why I love tournament poker, is deep in an MTT.
All right, let's do it. All right, so here we have under 100 left, deep in this Turbo MTT or ITM in the money. And let's take a look at the first hand from it, or the 10th hand of this final exam. So the hijack has raised, action gets to us, and pay close attention. There's only one question for this hand, but pay close attention to it, which is what option should we eliminate pre-flop? So in other words, we can fold, call, or raise. Of those 3, what is the one option that we should never do here?
And the answer to that is going to be that we need to eliminate the option to call. Calling here is a really bad option between the 3 because of the fact that we are so short stacked in this scenario. We want to be playing power poker with under 20 blinds here, and we're going to be looking to make a lot of 3-bet shoves. And this is, to me, a hand that I'm going to really tend to 3-bet shove unless I have a read that the player is very tight that's open. But we also, to be clear, do accept that you can go ahead and either make the shove or you can fold, but you cannot call. That is the option we are eliminating here.
Absolutely. Only from the big blind would we consider making some calls with 20 blinds or less. Other than that, we're just going to be playing shove fold poker. And so Katie has expressed her preference for shoving.
It's a strong one.
I would probably look at this guy's stats and want to see how loose he's playing. But either way, the shove fold decision. Let's see what Hero does. Hero jams, great risk-reward ratio, great play,
takes
and
it
wins
down.
this pot.
Oh, that looks a little bit better than folding.
So like we said, there are going to be some hands that are to set the stage and the progression that we think are interesting, but we are not going to test you guys on. And this is one of those. And so in this spot, the big blind only has around 2 blinds to start the hand. And in situations like that, you want to assume that you have no fold equity with respect to that player, that he's always going to call. And so as a result of that, you should shove here with basically any above average hand, because then you can pick up some chips from your share of the overlay, the small blind and the antes. So jamming here is going to be the best option.
I want to point out, I was just going to say, as he folds, that it's great to think about it as though you don't have any fold equity, but in my experience, you have way more than you should in these spots, which is to say more than 0.
Yes, and that brings us back to your infamous quote, Katie, which is, please tell me if I'm doing this justice, if your opponent has a fold button, then you have fold equity.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Wait, literally. All right, and now let's move to the next hand, which will be back to a question, so let's check this out.
All right, looking at exam question number 12, we have not the prettiest hand in the big blind, you could say. We're facing a raise to 20K in the big blind with Jack Deuce offsuit. So the question on this one is going to be, what preflop action should we take? Pause the video, figure it out, and come back.
That's right, Katie. We are deciding between fold, call, or raise. Hopefully you have locked in your answer. And the correct play here is going to be to shove. Now notice that our opponent has basically moved all in. He's bet 20,000. He only has 1,200 back. So this is what we would call a non-all-in, all-in, when the opponent is just trying to confuse you by betting something that is slightly different from a shove. So we want to treat this like a shove. And like we talked about in the sections on ICM ranges and big blind play, when you're getting significantly better than 2-1 and you're in the big blind, you want to go with any 2 cards. So here we're getting better than 3-1 pot odds. I would go with any 2 cards. And so the correct play here is to shove.
All right. I agree with almost everything you're saying here, but I think we can actually do slightly better than just shoving pre-flop here.
Excuse me, you're going to contradict me in front of our beloved audience and say this is a fold?
The Moshman? Yeah, I'm contradicting the Moshman. Okay, here, I really prefer going ahead and just calling and doing a stop and go where you call here and then you shove any flop. And the reason is that you sometimes get players to trip up by doing that. And you get them to fold getting like 50-1 or whatever. And I swear to you, it is the most gratifying feeling in the world when you get someone to fold getting 50-1. So you want to seize every edge. And in my experience, calling and then doing a stop and go where you shove any flop is slightly better, assuming you have a reliable internet connection. Otherwise, just go ahead and shove.
All right. So you know what? I'm going to amend, somehow change what I said. The important thing here is that you go with it. So we're accepting full credit for either 3-bet shove or for the stop and go play that Katie
Which
favors.
Is the better answer. I will give you a cookie.
So to clarify then, shove or call and then jam the flop for his tiny remaining stack are both acceptable answers and get full credit here. And look at this river. This river could be a nice difference and wins the pot for Hero. Okay, so in this next hand, it will contain a single question. So pay close attention to this one. Action is on us. And the question is simply, what should you do here? And it can see fold, call, min raise, shove, some other raise size. So specify what your exact action is here. So pause the video, decide on that, and then we'll turn it over to Katie for the answer.
And if you have your answer all ready to go, then that answer should be that we need to shove here. This is a great spot to shove, a very important one due to our ICM ranges, and in general the rule we're specifically referring to is going to be that we should shove the magic range when we're first in with an effective stack of fewer than 15 big blinds. This is an especially fun one to shove. I'm not nearly as scared here shoving Queen Jack suited as I can be with low pocket pairs that are also part of that magic range, which, as a reminder, is comprised of suited aces, suited broadways, and any pocket pair, which are going to be very profitable hands to go ahead and shove.
Absolutely, and like we talked about at one point, the suited broadways do the best of the move-in hands, so this really is an awesome hand for every reason. We've got 14 blinds here, so you need to jam this one in, which is what Hero does.
They do the best, and they look the best.
Yes. They take pride in their appearance. And you know what? I'm feeling this. I think second pair is going to be a winner here, but it's not.
That ace. Never want to see an ace when you have
don't.
the Queen Jack and you're all in without even seeing your opponent's hand. You never want to see that ace.
All right, so let's move on to the next hand.
All right, so continuing on in this same MTT, looking at final exam question 14, the big stacked cutoff has min-raised here, and it folds to us in the big blind. There are going to be 2 quiz questions here, and so the first one is right now, Colin, okay? What should we do here pre-flop?
You know what that is? If there is going to be a quiz question right now, I think that is the best one it could have been. What do we do pre-flop? So pause the video, come up with your answer. And the correct play here, full credit for this first question, if you said to call. When you look at the section on big blind defense, we give the hands we should generally defend in the big blind. Here we're getting 4.5 to 1 odds, 8-5 suited is comfortably in our big blind defense range. We would rather have deeper stacks, but this would still be profitable to defend. Now you might say, well, why don't I re-raise? And well, we love the aggression.
We do. We love it.
We don't have enough fold equity. This would be pretty spewy, and calling here, taking a flop, will be your best action. So full credit for calling. So here it does in fact call, and the question now is, what is our flop line? Again, you could say bet out, check fold, check call, check raise. So decide on your flop line, and that is the second and final part to this hand.
All right, so the answer to the second part here is going to be that we get to check shove. Check shoving is going to be the correct play here. And there's pretty much every reason to go ahead and make this play. It's a coordinated flop. Obviously, we have flop top pair, which is a huge flop for us considering the massive size of the pot and compared to our stack. Also, it's likely that villain is going to go ahead and c-bet here, which makes it easier to plan to go ahead and check raise. Again, you don't want to plan on doing check raise if it's unlikely that villain is going to go ahead and bet. And this way, also, we win more when he's missed versus, say, if we just open shove and allow him to pass on having made that c-bet. So it definitely is going to be the most profitable play to check shove on this flop.
Absolutely. Full credit for check shoving. Much better option than donk betting this flop. So completely agree there. Let's see what hero does. Hero checks, cutoff bets, hero jams, and works out very well. So let's move on now to the next hand.
All right, so this is not going to be a question that involves a quiz, but we thought it was an important spot, so we wanted to go ahead and bring it up. So we have villain, the same villain from last hand, making his reappearance with making just over a min raise, and we're in the cutoff here with king queen off. And so here we really want to be playing power poker in this scenario, and I wanted to point out, to me, this is a very important spot to go ahead and shove. What do you think, Colin?
Definite fold.
I think if you had stats on this player, let's say they had a very tight HUD stats displaying on them, then we could go ahead and fold this in actuality, but pretty much always jam suited. But in this scenario, let's say if we're up against a player with a VPIP PFR of like 29, 24, then 3-bet shoving this king queen off is going to be very profitable and a great spot that is a common scenario to come up deep in these turbo MTTs.
Yeah, I think that's a great analysis. Obviously, I was kidding when I said definite fold. But the thing here is that, like you said, you want to have a read on your opponent. So king, queen suited is fine to just go ahead and shove if you don't know much. And here you want to assess, what do we know about this guy? Now, we've seen that this opponent has raised beforehand. He's the big stack, which often means he's going to be playing more hands. So those are all good reasons to shove. Let's see what hero does. He jams. Another important thing is, of course, this is a shove fold spot with under 20 blinds outside of the big blind. And that looks like a decent flop for us.
I think we should have won that, yeah.
Yes.
All right, but the player was stronger than I would have guessed.
He was legit.
He was legit.
Maybe too legit.
Yeah, too legit to quit. He had to call when we shoved. Well, good news, everyone. We've reached the final table of this Turbo MTT, and to celebrate, we are going to have a hand we talk about that's not a quiz question. That's our celebration so far. So with this hand, it folds to us in the small blind with the king 6 offsuit. Now, as you see, we are mid-stack at this final table. Very important at the start of a final table to assess the stacks, because it's going to dictate a lot of your strategy. And so here, what we wanted to point out is that you can go ahead and raise, which is going to be stylistically what we prefer to apply ICM pressure. We do cover the big blind. We do have a king high hand also. But you could also go ahead and complete here as well. The important thing is that it would be a mistake to fold this hand.
Absolutely. Different styles, but I agree with you, Katie. Raising here is best. Let's see what hero does. He does raise nice, larger sizing, full 3x from the small blind, like we talk about on that day. Well done, hero. And that's our cue to move on to hand number 17.
All right, so for hand 17, we're going to be looking at a three-parter again. So there are going to be 3 little questions with this. We have the always beautiful King Jack suited. And our first question is going to be, what action should we take here?
All right. So first the 3, and Katie, what is the correct answer?
The correct answer is going to be to raise with this King Jack suited.
Yeah, absolutely. So suited broadways, you can generally open from any position. Here we're definitely going to do that. Hero comes in with the min raise. And now we're going to get to a flop and the second of the 3 questions. So the second of the 3 questions is, what is the effective remaining stack at this flop from Hero's perspective. So effective stack, pause the video, come up with your answer. And the answer here is, remember that the effective stack is the most that you could lose in a given spot. So here the most we could lose at the flop is going to be the player to our left's 523,000. If we bet more than that, it just goes into a side pot with guaranteed win. So 523,000 is going to be the correct answer to the effective stack. And then the final question is, what is our best play at this flop? So pause, decide on that. And the correct play here is going to be to shove. You put everything together here, and the pot is going to be larger than the effective remaining stack. So you have a good risk-reward ratio on shoving. A smaller bet will commit us anyway. This way, by jamming, we maximize fold equity, we maximize pressure on our opponents, and we come out with a strong semi-bluff. When in doubt, we want to play these draws aggressively. Now, I would say that we will also accept, if you want to bet something that is committing and then call off the rest, maybe you think that looks stronger, to bet 300,000, call off the rest. But top answer is going to be to shove. That's exactly what Hero does and wins this pot without a fight.
Yeah, and sometimes I think we face questions, or you see questions in the forums about, well, how do I build a stack at the final table? And to me, this is a really important point and a really good moment in this tournament for this player, where you need to play aggressively, and this is a significant opportunity for Hero.
Yes, well said, Katie. And now let's look at the next hand, which, if I'm not much mistaken, will be ace queen. So this is another one that's not a quiz, but it brings up a really important point, which is that normally here this would be a clear shove. We would basically ignore the small blind who only starts the hand off with under 3 blinds, and we say we have a late position raise. We have an effective stack of 12 blinds with the raiser. We're out of position. We're just going to jam the ace queen. And here jamming is still a good play, but this is actually close and will be the bottom of my range. And the reason for that is because we should put our opponent on a much tighter range than normal, because he's the final table mid-stack. We see here that the cutoff has 4 blinds. The button has 4 blinds. And yet, this player wants to make kind of a committing raise from the hijack. So again, put him on a much tighter range. This is close, but I would still shove on balance. What do you think, Katie? Reasonable shove?
I agree, but the important point really, I think, with this hand is whatever decision you make, it is very close, I think.
Yeah, yes. And so when you're the mid-stack, that obviously affects your play and should also affect your perception of your opponents, because it's an intuitive adjustment to make. And here we go. Check it out. We win a nice side pot, chip up some, and that's going to lead to the final test question. So get ready. Now there are only 4 left. Things are getting serious. They're getting hot, maybe. Anyway, so with 4 left, the cutoff has been raised. Action gets to us in the big blind. And the question is simply, what is your move here? So pause the video, come up with an answer. And Katie, what do you say? What are you doing?
Okay, we should go ahead and shove in this spot. This is a dream spot with ICM ranges to go ahead and get to 3-bet shove. We can generally jam our magic range versus late position opens in the big blind, but even better here is the fact that we are putting pressure on a mid-stack in this scenario. The small blind is shorter than both of us, so we can get away possibly with even more. So definitely a very profitable spot to go ahead and get to just shove. Even if you don't love deuces, you've got to put it in here.
Completely correct, Katie. And you know what? As we know, as the big stack, right, we can pressure mid stacks. But this is actually kind of a similar situation. We're pressuring another mid stack. If we jam, we are the ones who have fold equity. We put him to the test. If he's serious about this hand, you know what I would say to him?
What would you say? Would you type it in?
Yeah, I would type in, okay? And then I'd be accused of collusion, so maybe that wouldn't be a good idea.
Maybe not.
No, he should just go ahead and jam this hand if he wants to play it. There are not many hands that he's going to want to call it off and bust before the much shorter stack. So I completely agree with your answer. Hugh does go ahead and shove. He gets the fold. Well done, hero.
And wins a really nice pot and cements his status as the second chip leader more so from this hand also.
Yes, yes. And now let's take a look at the final hand, which is also not going to be a quiz question. So for completeness, we're showing the final hand. Slight spoiler there, perhaps, Katie.
The final hand for hero, not the final hand for the tournament, I guess.
Yeah, but you know what? At least earlier on, we didn't do things like ask somebody, what's your play, as we just revealed what hero did or something like that.
Hopefully we didn't.
Yeah, I think we're doing pretty good on that front, on the spoilers. Hero goes ahead and shoves. This is pretty standard at 16 blinds to go ahead and shove facing a large raise. We get called. We think, hey, all is good. Until the river.
All right, so here, this is not my hand history, of course, but I have been here. And what I think is really important is, you're obviously, when you lose this hand, you're going to feel frustrated off the bat. You're going to be like, oh, I got it in so good. And, it can be a situation where you can get really upset if you let yourself. But it's really important to try to reframe that as quickly as possible once you get out of the initial disappointment of not completely winning the tournament. And keep in mind that odds are, if you get third in a Turbo MTT, you ran probably pretty darn good to get to that point. So you want to be happy with the money that you made. And overall, of course, the biggest thing is being happy with the decisions you make. Regardless of when you bust a tournament, you should always try to set yourself up to be happy with how you played.
Yeah, all you can do is play your best. That's the only thing you can do. And keep a good mindset. We talked about that as being such an important non-playing skill. So like Katie said, you had to have run very good to get here. And if you keep a good mindset, you're going to go deep in more of these. And that is a really important thing to focus on in your playing journey.
So, wait one. All right, so this concludes the second part of our final exam, and let's take a look at how to figure out how you did on this, Colin.
Absolutely, Katie. So if you got every single point, so there are 15 hands, 15 total points, excluding the extra credit, which could bump you up one number. But if you got all of them correct or missed just one, you get an A.
With a gold star. I suggested some alternative things with a gold star, but I think we went a little bit more old school with the scoring, which is probably for the best.
Absolutely. If you got 12 or 13 correct, you got a B. Now, Katie, I hope that nobody watching needs this next slide.
Let's hope.
Here it is.
No gold stars on the next slide.
No. 10 or 11 is a C, but you know what? There's some good news, Katie, which is that a C is passing. Yes, you should probably review a little bit more, but overall, you still got the vast majority right, and you pass.
And you're not going to be held back to the next grade, even if maybe you should go back and look at some concepts that may have been confusing, post in the forums, reacquaint yourself with some of the fundamentals.
Yes. Now, 9 or fewer correct answers. I also could have used a different word beginning with an F.
Not passing. Is that what they said in school when you were growing up?
Yes, not passing. Actually, I guess it doesn't begin with an F. It is an F.
It is an F. Yeah,
yes.
It doesn't begin with an F.
But with that said, 9 or fewer, you know what? It's okay. Just go back, review this course. You can take the final again. So for this time, you didn't pass. But this is going to be our final exam scoring guide.
And nobody needs to know. You can come back and ace the test, get the gold star.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, we just really want to thank you so much for taking this course with us. Like we said in the book, we know you guys can be successful. We want to hear about your journey, and we'd be very happy to help with any questions that come up and see you on the forums.
Absolutely. So this has been Colin Moshman and Katie Dozier one last time for the CardsChat.com course, Become a Winning Poker Player in 30 Days.